Anne Bernard. We're interviewing in Plainview, New York, in the United States of America, and the interview is taking place in English. October 31st, 1997, the survivor is Siegfried Hudes. I'm interviewing him. My name is Anne Bernard, in Plainview, New York, in the United States of America, and the interview is taking place in English. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Could you tell me your name, please?
My name is Siegfried Hudes.
What's your nickname?
Ziggy.
How do you spell Hudes?
H-U-D like in David, E-S.
Where were you born?
In Germany.
Where in Germany?
Dortmund, Germany. Yeah.
Where is that near?
It's near Köln and Aachen.
How old are you?
68.
What's your birth date?
October 17, 1929.
How long did you live in Germany?
A very short time. I think I lived in Germany 2 years.
Where did you move to?
We moved all around. We went from Germany to Poland, back to Holland, and then settled in Belgium.
Where in Belgium?
Antwerp, Belgium.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one brother, and I had a sister who's no longer with us.
What happened to your sister?
My sister, they took my sister in 1943 and my mother to Auschwitz, to concentration camp in Auschwitz.
And what happened to your sister in Auschwitz?
Since they shaved her hair off and they gave her different clothes, and she decided that she didn't want to live anymore. And 1 month after coming to Auschwitz, she died.
How do you know this?
My mother told me, who was with her until she died.
What was the difference in your sister's age with yours?
4 years.
Younger or older?
Older.
And what's the difference in your age between you and your brother?
We are twins. Yes.
Let's talk about your mother and father. What did your father do for a living?
He was an upholsterer. And we had a little business in Antwerp, Belgium. Yes.
How little was little?
Well, he was a one-man business. So he did little.
What kind of a relationship did you have with your father?
Very good. He was our friend, and he was our provider. Whatever he did the best for us. Wasn't much, but whatever it was good.
How did your mother help him?
By working with him in the front of the store and cleaning up, helping, schlepping, all these things, and this is the way she helped him.
What kind of upholstery did he do?
Couches, chairs. That's the main business.
What was it like growing up as a little boy with a twin?
We didn't have no problems. The only thing it was that, we were different in sports. I was a better sportsman, so I had different friends than he had. And otherwise, we had no problems whatsoever.
What kind of a friend was he as a brother?
As a brother, I believe he was my best friend, my confidant, a person who I could call any time of the day and night, and vice versa.
Have you always had that kind of a relationship with him?
As I said to you once, I don't believe there are too many people who have that kind of a relationship. We were born together. We lived in mother's house together. We suffered in the war together. We came to America together. We went into business together. And 50 years later, we're still together. I think this is, not too many people could say that.
As a small boy growing up, what kind of attention did you receive from your parents because you were twins?
We received good, very fine attentions from our parents. Our mother was very proud of us. She used to take us for walks together, and all the people in those days looked at us like we were some kind of, how should I mention, some kind of freaks, you know, twins. And that's we wore the same clothes up to the war. In 1940, we wore the same clothes. And we had all the attention we can get.
Tell me about the house that you lived in Antwerp.
I think I showed you the picture. I was downstairs, a railroad flat. The front of the two windows was my father's factory, like we say. And in the back 3 rooms we lived. We did not have a separate bedroom. We all lived in one bedroom, that including my sister. And the kitchen, no living room like we have here. And this was it. We didn't have anything better than that.
What language did you speak at home?
At home we spoke Jewish or German, but also we learned to speak the Flemish language in school. And we as kids spoke it perfectly.
What kind of language did you speak to your friends?
Flemish. Flemish.
Tell me about some of the holidays that you celebrated at home.
Holidays we celebrated was the most beautiful thing, because we went to Hebrew school, and for the holidays we went to shul. Our parents made a holiday dinner, the best they could, and also once in a while we invited some people, a friend or a relative, to come for dinner when they had the money to do it.
Why? Why do you say when they had the money?
Well, our parents, I must say, were very poor people, but the love they gave us was no money in the world can give you. And we loved them without reservation.
What did they do that made you feel this way?
What parents did in those days, they protected their children. They did everything they can to give us the best that they could. They worked very hard. They tried, but it was very difficult for newcomers into a different country to start up. And this took them many, many years to get a little bit up. But in the beginning, the first few years, it was very, very hard for them, and they were very, very poor, very poor.
What was the thing you most remember about your father?
Well, the most thing I remember might not be such a beautiful thing, but we remembered it. because we did not want to go to Hebrew school or called Cheder on Sundays. And my father used to say, you go and I'll pick you up on the street corner, and then we go someplace else. And we didn't have to go to Cheder. This is which was done many, many Sundays. So we loved him for it. Yeah.
How aware was he that this is what you were doing?
Well, he was aware of that. We didn't want to go to Cheder because we had 5 days of Cheder in our regular school, and Sunday was just a Cheder where we went there to get something to eat. We used to get like a sandwich with jelly on top of it, so we went there so we had something to eat.
What happened on the days that you decided not to go there?
My father took us someplace to the flea market. So we met him, and then we went to the flea market, and then we went home exactly when Cheder was finished, so that our mother wouldn't have anything, she would know the difference.
What was the flea market like?
Just the same like it is in the United States. The same thing with boots, and that time they had many pigeons, and Belgium is a country who has pigeons. They do fly pigeons all over the world. So we looked at them, we just walked around and looked at things.
What part of Antwerp was the flea market?
It was not far from our shul. We used to belong to the Hollandish shul because we were in the choir. We belonged to the choir, so we knew where it was.
How long did you belong to the choir?
Until the war. I belonged in the choir. The exact date, I think I was 7. I started to sing in the choir, 7 or 8. And as soon as the war started, that was it. But we loved the shul because it was the richest shul in Antwerp, or presumed from Belgium. And what they did is every Passover, they used to give all the young men in the choir, they used to buy them a complete outfit, from shoes to socks to suit, shirt and tie. And that's why we loved to belong to it used to call it the Hollandish shul.
Did your brother participate in this as well?
He came later. He came into the choir later, because to belong to the choir, you had to do a lot of testing with your voice. And you know, some people were a little shyer than others to do this in front of young men. But he came through and he did it, and he belonged there too.
How many boys were in the choir?
We had a large choir. We had we must have 14, I forgot the name, what they called the voices of the young men. Wasn't a tenor, was it the altos? And then we were standing on that side here. On this side was 2, 4, 6, 8 baritones. And on that side we had 2, 4, 6, 8 bass. And these were older men. We were the youngsters, and these were the older. And also in this choir belonged a very famous tenor who sang in all the operas. I believe I told you that every year on his birthday, Radio QXR has his operatic songs on every year. And his name, I will tell you this later. I'm sorry. I just can't recall his name, but I will tell you.
What position did you sing in?
An alto.
What were some of the songs that you would sing?
All kinds of whatever the services required. We had cantors in that shul. We had a dirigent, which means he was a leader of the orchestra, of the choir, and he led us. And we had twice a week we had practice, because every was a holidays was different. Saturday was different. Friday night was different services, different songs that we had to sing, and all kinds of. And also, we did bar mitzvahs. We sang on bar mitzvahs, yes, which the choir got paid. We did not get paid, but the choir got paid for it. Yeah.
How did you feel about being in the choir?
I loved it. I loved it very much, because these were all my friends that we went to school with, and so we palled around with them in the park, and also we learned sign language, because we were not allowed to speak, and we learned sign language to speak to one another. Yeah.
Could you sing for us something that you remembered from then?
It's going to be hard. It's well, let me try and sing something for you, which every Jewish person in the world knows. It is something that before a person passes on, this is what he prays to. And it goes, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
How many years were you in the choir?
I think I was in the choir 4 years. 4 years, yes. 3 or 4 years. I can't recall when I started.
In your home, what was your favorite holiday?
I just don't know the day what it was, because we played with nuts. We used to play with the hazelnuts closer against the wall. And that was the holiday. Simchas Torah, which just happened. Simchas Torah just passed, and that's the holiday where you get presents. And we used to get, each used to get 6 hazelnuts, and we used to play against the wall who's closer. And there used to be tremendous fights with my sister and my brother, because nobody wanted to lose that hazelnut. Yeah.
Where did you play with the hazelnuts?
In the house, in the kitchen. In the kitchen against the wall. We found a little spot. It was empty, and we used to throw it against the door.
How up to date and modern was this apartment that you lived in?
It wasn't like this apartment that we live in today, that I live in today. My mother used to have her big furniture was orange crates. And she used to decorate it with paper and made little points cut out, and this was our furniture. But we had beds and a kitchen table. That was it.
What was your favorite food that your mother cooked for you?
My favorite choice is chicken soup with the big eyes, because how fatter the chicken was, how more better it was, better the chicken. And today we don't eat this anymore. But this was at the time. And this was, we waited because we could have seconds. Because it was just a little more water. And that was our favorite dish. Because chicken was not every Saturday.
What, when you think about the holidays altogether, where was your position at the table?
My position. My sister was sitting next to my mother, and we were sitting on the other side with my father, because my sister was the helper of my mother. So she always sat next to my mother to help her whatever she had to do. Yeah, but I think we sit on the right side. I think we sat on the right side, yes. Because first of all, the kitchen was closer on the left, so I believe we sat on the right.
Could you describe the Shabbos table to us?
The Shabbos table was always a white tablecloth. Candles were always on. This was when my mother said her prayers, it was very moving. Many times they cried because in those times they remembered their parents, her mother. And it was, Shabbos was what food we had was beautiful. When we sat with our sister, my father and my mother, it was a great evening for Shabbos.
Do you remember what you would talk about at the Shabbos table?
No, I can't remember that, but I would remember that my brother and I would talk only about sports events, because soccer was a very big event in Belgium. So that's what young people were talking about. And my father didn't speak much, because there was nothing that he said that he could say. Only thing was, what he was interested in is working and go to shul.
How strict a home was your home?
Very. My mother was very strict with us. Even in later years, she was very, very strict. Even as we grown up, she was very strict. She could hit you even at 18 or 19. She wouldn't be afraid of that. She was extremely, extremely strict with all her children, especially with me, because I was a very bad boy. I wasn't a good kid, even those days, because one day they hit my brother, and I went after him and I hit the guy, and I knocked the tooth out of his mouth. And they came to my mother, and I got a beating of my life that time. She was extremely strict, up to her death.
What did she hit you with?
Her hand was good enough. And she would look at you and you would be afraid. You would be afraid. As a young man, but she made me what I am today. She made me a human being, a concerned human being, a person who she taught me to be charitable and never to flaunt the little success that we achieved. Never. Because she used to say to us, you don't know what the next person hurts. And she was extremely, this she mentioned 1,000,000 times, because we were successful a little bit in life, and she didn't want anybody to know and to see and not to show off with all kinds of material things. And what she does to us, we still remember her about charity. That was her motto.
This incident that you're describing, why was your brother hit?
Because in streets, you know, with the boys, they had a little argument or a fight, and they hit him, you know. And when I came back from playing soccer, so they told me that this person hit my brother. So I went after him, and I hit him. Because I guess it must have been maybe a little twin instinct or something like that, or whatever you might call it. But I felt it, because when they hit my brother, I felt they hit me. And then I went after him.
Tell me about your interest in sports as a small boy.
As I mentioned, this soccer was the big sports. Soccer and, how do I say that? It's a coureur in French. It's a bicycle riding. It's very, very big in Europe and also in Belgium. As a young man, I always wanted to be a soccer player or a bicycle rider. Like I'm sure you know the Tour of France and all of these things. And I could never achieve this. But in the war, when we were hidden, when nobody went out, we didn't go out for years from our little apartment. And we relied on people to bring us food. I read in the paper that I have tryouts for the soccer team, the football club Antwerp. And those days it was one of the fine teams. And I spoke to my mother about it, and naturally she said, no, you can't go, you can't go. But I made her so crazy that she let me go. And I passed it, and I became a B player for the national team of Belgium. But I never went there. The only time I wanted to do it because they get a card, and you could go in to the entrance where all the ball players went in, and you didn't have to pay to see all these games. I never went. I have the card someplace, but I can't find it. I looked for it. But the card that I became a member of the football club Antwerp, but I can't find it.
Thank you. We'll continue on the next tape.
Thank you.
Tape 2, the survivor is Siegfried Hudes. The date is October 31st, 1997. We were talking about soccer. What other sports did you play as a small boy?
Table tennis. I played for the Maccabee, and I became, from a D player, I became an A+ player. And I played in tournaments. I played for the club Maccabee, and I became, as I said, a very fine player. I played for the national team of Belgium. I represented Belgium in the World Championships in 1946 in Wimbledon, London.
Getting back to before the war, were you playing table tennis then?
No.
Besides soccer, what else did you do as a small boy growing up in Antwerp?
That's all we went to school, to cheder, and we wanted to play soccer. That's all day and all night if we could.
Tell me about school.
School, we had to wear uniforms to go to school. To Hebrew school, we had to have uniforms. We had, if I remember correctly, 2 or 2.5 hours of Flemish, and the rest was all Hebrew. We wore talashim, I don't know if I use the right word, and we had to have payas. And every morning he used to count the tails like of the talashim. He counted if they were right. If there was a little piece missing, they were pusel. It wasn't, you couldn't wear them anymore. And that's how strict they were in school.
How often did it happen that you didn't have the right knots on the talaisim?
Many times, because we used to play with them and rip off a little piece by accident. And we didn't dare tell our parents until they counted them and they found it, and then you had to take them off and get another one.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Being very honest, I did not have any favorite subject. I didn't like school at all. All I wanted to do was play soccer, because that's why I was a bad guy.
So what did you do?
I went to school because we had to go to school. I always tried to be a favorite of the teacher, so you would get better marks. And God forbid you had bad marks and you came home. You wouldn't show them to your parents, especially not to my mother, because it would be a terrible evening.
What would she do?
She would punish you bitterly, and she would make you sit and learn for hours and hours. She wouldn't let you go out anymore in the evening, play with your boys, with your friends. And this is the punishment. You stayed in the house and learn and learn and learn. And this didn't go on only for one day. This went on for weeks until the next until the next test came, and then you brought it home, the marks, and then she would let you play if you passed it.
In looking back, what did you think about that treatment then?
We didn't think about it as anything but deserving, and it didn't bother. This was it. This is the way we had to live. This is what it was. We didn't know any better as children. That was it, you know. It was it that we had to do. We resented to bring our slippers for our father every day. My brother and my sister every day had to bring the slippers to my father when he came home. But that was it. We had to do it, and we did it. And I think we're better people for that, for it.
Why?
Because we learned that we had to listen and learn and teach people, and they teach you to be decent and not to do any harm to anyone.
When did life change for you from that kind of environment?
Life changed from that when we went to the priest. That's when life changed.
Before that, what kind of information were you receiving in your home about anti-Semitism?
None at all. None at all. Because young people weren't supposed to know. It was only discussed between the elders. Young people were never taught anything. Everything was a secret.
What kind of anti-Semitism did you experience in Antwerp itself?
Before the war, the anti-Semitism was that we never could become a citizen of Belgium. My father used to have a green card so that he could work, but a citizen, never. After the war, in the wartime, we found many. Most of Belgium were sympathizers to the Nazis.
What kind of anti-Semitism did you experience in the neighborhood in which you lived?
None, because the neighborhood we lived were mostly all Jewish. It was like an area for about 10 blocks, square blocks, all Jewish. So there was no problem.
What was the street on which you lived?
The name of the street was Wipstraat. Was a small little street. When I go back today, I can't believe that we lived on that street. And it was only strictly Jewish. 99.5% all Jewish. So we knew each other from school. The parents knew each other, and the children knew each other. So no problem.
At what point did this peaceful life change for you?
Unfortunately, the peaceful life started when the Germans came into Belgium. And they took my father, and how he was shot. We saw this as young people. I believe what we saw when we saw our father shot, we became hardened people, and we became hard. That crying was very hard for us to do. The things that we saw, the things that we heard, and it became very hard. And even today, in America, you will ask my wife, we are very hard. We don't show the love that we have sometimes for our children, but we love them dearly, but emotionally we cannot show our love and our support for our children. And our children resent that. They resented it until they found, as they grew up, who we were, where we came from.
Tell me about how your father was shot.
My father left where he worked for the Germans, and all of a sudden he came home to Antwerp, to us. We didn't know that he'd come. And he came, and we had bar mitzvah lessons. Even in the wartime, we took bar mitzvah lessons. And one day he came and picked us up. And I can't begin to tell you, when they took him, the German asked him for some kind of a papers, and since he left the camp where he was working for the Germans in France, and they took him, and he didn't want to go, and he fought them, and they schlepped him up to a truck the German trucks were very high, and it was hard for him to reach it. And he fought with them, and they shot him. And my brother and I saw that. And we had to go home to my mother and tell her that they just took her husband. And that was not easy. My brother and I discussed it for hours before we told our mother. Because we only told her because it was winter. And we wanted her to send him his clothes, his winter clothes. And we told her. And she did send his clothes. I don't know if he ever received it. But we did send him her clothes.
If you had seen your father just shot, where was she going to send these clothes?
There was it's called a Zammellager. It's called a Mechelen. It's a city in Belgium where they took all these people into an army barrack. It's like an army barrack, and they kept them until they moved them to Auschwitz.
Your father was not killed when you watched him being shot. Is that right?
I know he was shot. He went down. He laid on the ground. I know he was bleeding. And we left there because we didn't want to get caught. My brother and I, we didn't want to stay there and watch it. Because we couldn't say anything and we couldn't do anything. We knew that we couldn't say anything. We were so young and we knew. And we just left.
How old were you?
Oh, God. Must have been going on 13 because we took bar mitzvah lessons. So it must have been close to 13. Let's say 12 and a half, something like this.
How do you know that your father wasn't dead?
I presumed. We presumed. Once we saw him lay on the floor and he was bleeding, I knew. We presumed he was dead. We were not sure, but...
Then why would you suggest to your mother that she send the clothes if you presume that he was dead?
Just to make sure in case he wasn't. So at least he will have his winter clothes. Because what is she going to do with his clothes? Either way. If he was dead or he was alive, his clothes were no use to her. The few clothes, you're talking about clothes, you know, 2 pair of pants and the shoes, and maybe a heavy sweater. You know, wasn't that elaborate clothing that my father had, you know.
You said that he had been in another place working for the Germans.
Yeah.
When did he go there?
I have to recollect. It's very hard because we were young, you know. But I think it was, I think in 1942, when they promised that if the men would go to work for the Germans, that they will not harm their wives and their children. I believe 1942.
How did your mother manage economically without him?
It was awful. It was awful. But there were some well-to-do Jewish people who supported, who she begged, and they helped her. Yeah.
Who were they?
It's so hard. You know, also you must remember we were young to remember all these names, you know. When you're young, who cared for the names? We were looking to do sports and all of that as young people do. I really can't recall. Maybe my brother would recall you. I can't.
How long was your father away working for the Germans?
Yeah, I believe 6 to 8 months. I can't be exact, but I presume. It wasn't long anyway.
How often did you hear from him?
Never. Never. They never said. They weren't. I believe. Now, I'm not sure, but I believe that they weren't allowed to write also.
What was your reaction when he returned home?
Joy, because we loved him dearly. We still do. And well, how can I tell you? It was joy without, but I can't describe you how happy we were to see him.
Was he supposed to return back to the German camp that he had come from?
No, he snuck out. He left there without them knowing, and he came back home. That's why he didn't have any papers with him. He wasn't supposed to be there.
Before this happened, could you describe to me how you went to Dunkirk?
Yes. In 1940, when the Germans marched into Belgium, my parents and thousands of others decided to go to Dunkirk because they heard that there are boats leaving from Dunkirk to England. And since my parents fled from Germany, they didn't want to be under them. So we left with the few belongings that they had on a cart, and we came to Dunkirk. And the last boat left Dunkirk, and all my friends were on board. I can name you 6 friends of mine who were on that board from the choir, and about 500 or 600 yards, I don't know exactly, but let's say a half a mile offshore, the boat went on a mine, and they all died. So, after the last boat left Dunkirk, we went back to Antwerp, walked back to Antwerp.
How long a walk was it?
Weeks and weeks, because Dunkirk, I estimate from Antwerp to Dunkirk, I'm just guessing right now, 350 miles.
Where did you sleep?
In a barn, all over barns. There were farmers, and not only us alone, there were thousands of other people, Jewish people, who wanted to leave. And then the Germans came in, so we walked back.
What did you do for food?
We sold off things to the farmers. The people who had some money, they bought eggs from the farmers, or cheese or whatever. But the rest, they sold things.
What do you most remember about that trip to Dunkirk and back?
The most that I remember is that one night we slept in a barn, and my mother and my father, they both should rest in peace, they argued on where to sleep. My father wanted this side and my mother wanted this side, and they went on my mother's side. And then some other people came into the barn, and they slept on the side when my father wanted to sleep and they got killed with a V2 bomb. And then we went home. That's my most memorable thing that I remember. Because like you must remember, you're speaking about 50 years ago, and we were young. And as young people, we didn't care so much about politics and what life is. We cared about different things.
What happened when you saw that the bomb had come through?
Well, it was a terrible, terrible scene. And they all cried. My father cried. If I remember, he hugged my mother because she made him go to the other side. And I remember that scene with these people screaming and yelling and screaming and crying. And as I said to you before, this made us very hard. Maybe we don't show it. We like to joke and kibitz and laugh, because underneath all of this is a very hardened person.
Who are the people that you remember, your choir buddies that were on that ship?
Yeah, these are friends of mine who are written down at the in Brussels, at the monument in Brussels, and their names are written in stone. My dear friend, we have all nicknames. I don't know, I'm sure here too, but as young kids, everybody has a nickname. And most of us, we didn't know our own names, we know nicknames. And my friends, Kruczek, Birnbaum, me they called Zudek, Valentine, Malpe. Malpe is an ape. I can name you many, many names who are written in the wall. And I have them with me in the book of all Belgian people who did not return.
What was the next decision that your family had after you came back from Dunkirk?
Where to live. Our place was taken. Where to live and how to start all over again. And as you probably well know, it was awfully hard to do this. And there were people who struggled all their lives, but they survived, and they did, and again they started up. My father started again in his own business, made barely a living, but they survived. And then, I think it was 6 months or a year later, again they had to take us away. They sent us to different parts in Belgium to live.
Who was they?
The German government, the Germans, the Nazis, the Germans. They sent us to a place. Again they took us apart and moved everything to a different small town. It is called Hasselt. It's not Hasselt. I don't know the name of the place, but the nearest bigger town is Hasselt in Belgium. It's in Limburg. And again there they lived. And my mother became very friendly with the farmers. And if I remember right, I don't know, my mother smuggled meat to the big city in Brussels, and she sold it there. And how she smuggled it, you will not believe, in her corset. But then when she came back and she had the few dollars that she made, she went to the farmer and bought cheeses and eggs. And we had chickens too, where we lived, in this small town, in our little backyard. And our father came once in a while.
Where was he?
In Antwerp.
How did she pay for the meat that she took to Antwerp?
I had a cousin who was a young man who lived in Brussels, who became a martyr, who was stoned in the monument in Brussels. And he helped her so to buy the meat and bring it back, and they would split. Yes.
Did you go to school in this new town near Limburg?
Yes. Yes. We went to school, and no shoes. We wore klompen. I don't know if you know what klompen are, but these are the wooden shoes from Holland. And we wore those kind of shoes to go to school for a little while.
What kind of a school was it?
A Gentile school. No Jewish children except maybe 2 or 3. My brother and I don't think my sister went to school over there, just me and my brother. Another few Jewish people who also came with us from Antwerp, who lived in the area.
How did that school work out for you?
Didn't matter, we didn't want to go to school there anyway, because we didn't have no friends. When you're young people, we want friends, we want to walk with friends. We didn't have anybody. We were strangers in a different part of the world or the country, and we didn't know anybody. And probably they looked upon us like different kind of people because we had to wear the star.
Thank you. We'll pick up on the next tape. Tape 3. The survivor is Siegfried Hudes. It's October 31st, 1997. How long did you stay in Limburg?
I believe between 6 and 7 months. I don't remember exactly, but I believe 6 or 7 months.
And then what happened?
Then again, they dismantled it, and we had to go back to Antwerp, where we lived before.
What kind of a place did you move back to?
We looked again at the same street, but we couldn't find anything, and we moved to a different street, which is called Provinzenstraat, which is a block and a half away from where we used to live.
So how did you feel about going back?
I felt good because I was happy maybe I would see my friends again, and we would start school and do our things as young people do and live in what I thought was my country.
Now, skipping ahead, because we've discussed what happened to your father, what did your mother do after your father was shot?
After we told our mother that our father was shot, first thing she said, it is now winter time and we have to send him his winter clothes. Because we didn't know if he was dead or alive, but it didn't mean anything. His clothes was no use if he wasn't coming home.
Then how did the family manage after that?
Managed people came to help us with all kinds of, sometimes money, sometimes they brought food to our home, and it was only to the underground.
Could you explain that a little further?
Well, the underground, the few people who were in the underground helped all the people with food supplies. I know the person from first hand who I see now once a year who did this for 4 years for all the Jewish people who he hid, who he knew were hidden, and brought them food every day. He was telling me for 4 years he never lived in his house for one day, always someplace else.
Would you elaborate on how the underground helped you specifically?
They came, they didn't speak to us, they only spoke to my mother. And they had signals when they came in on the door. If they knocked 5 times, it was a person that we were allowed to come in. And this is the way, I can't begin to tell you exactly, but it was a whole ring of people who helped. It wasn't just one person. It was, I know, right now I know 6 people that are alive that I know who helped.
What do you mean by help? What did they do for you?
They took people, hid them, brought them to different kinds of Gentile people, to farms and to cloisters and to priests.
How did they help you and your sister and your brother specifically?
One day, one of the underground came to my mother and they said that they could help us. They could help us save our 3 children. And they would take us away to a priest. And that whatever happens, they would be alive after the war. My sister did not want to leave my mother. And so my mother sent my brother and myself to this particular priest. His name is Father de Beukelaar.
How old were you?
I think a little bit older than 13. Yes.
Had you been bar mitzvahed?
No. I never had a bar mitzvah. No, my wife wants to do it for me today, but we don't want to.
Why didn't you have a bar mitzvah?
Because we couldn't have it. We weren't allowed. Jews were not allowed to live. So how could we have a bar mitzvah?
Tell me more about Father de Beukelaar.
We arrived, I know his name now, with a gentleman by the name of Professor Flom. We arrived with him on the outskirts of Antwerp, and we went to a church. And he introduced us to a priest. He was in his, how should I say this, in his priestly clothes. And he introduced me to him. And he said, you go with this man and he will help you. And I will come to visit you once a week. And we said goodbye. As young people, we just said goodbye. And we went with the father And he took us to his house, and he mentioned to us that he will have to change our names. And from now on, my name would be just Klaus, and my brother's would be J. Klaus. And we should remember that never to mention your name except just Klaus and Jack J. Klaus. And we lived with him for about 3 weeks in his house, and every day we had to learn what to do. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, we went into an orphanage home.
What do you mean every day you had to learn what to do?
He used to say, "What is your name?" And sometimes we will make a mistake and say my real name. And he used to say, "No, that's not your name. Your name is just Klaus." So to correct us. And then he told us that we're going to live in an orphanage home with many young people, and that you never say that you are Jewish. And never forget that your name is just Klaus. He tried to teach you this to break you in when you are going to live in the orphanage home, you would know that your name is just Klaus.
What else did he teach you?
He told us that while I'm here, we could read our Bible, but we should be careful when we do it. We should do it in a special room, which they're going to show me in the orphanage home. Also, we had another Jewish boy with us. And we moved in and we blended in with these boys. We went to school, we played soccer with them like young people do.
Who was the other Jewish boy?
The other Jewish boy, unfortunately, is not no more with us. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This boy lives today in Israel. I made a mistake. This boy lives in Israel today. And also to the father, he was a younger boy than we were. I think he was 4 or 5 years younger. Was a little young man, little boy. And we took care of him up to the last until we changed him to a different place. He lived with us for at least 1.5 years. And then the father changed his place for him.
What was his name?
Abraham Cohen. That's Abraham Cohen. Yeah, his Jewish name.
When you left your mother in Antwerp and your sister, where did you think you were going?
I didn't know where I was going. We followed orders. Our mother told us to go there, and she wants to make sure that we be alive, and she'll see us in a couple of months.
What did you take with you?
Nothing.
What time of day was it when you left your home?
We left during the day. We left during the day, and we took the trolley car all the way up to Shoah. And I remember that this gentleman, we never sat with him together in the trolley car. He sat separated than us. But I know that he had a gun in his pocket because we saw it accidentally.
What was the father's house like?
It was magnificent. To me, to us, it seemed like it was a mansion, like it was something unbelievable. Somebody who was extremely wealthy to be able to live in a home like that. It was an extremely beautiful neighborhood, only beautiful homes.
Did you know exactly who he was?
I knew he was a Catholic priest because of his clothing, but that's all I knew. I did not know what he does, what he do, but he was extremely nice to us.
What kind of food did you eat in his house?
All kinds of food, eggs. You would not know, but in Belgium we eat different than we eat here. We eat dinner. We have bread and all kinds of cheeses and salmons, but lunch we have dinner. Lunch in Belgium is dinner here. Yes.
Did you think that you were lucky to be there?
No. No, we missed our mother very much. Yes, but it was something that we had to do. And as I told you before, we were very hard. What we went through in our young lives, we were hardened. And my brother, for years and years, never wanted to speak about it.
Tell me about the orphanage.
The orphanage was a huge home, huge, with many rooms for the boys to sleep. We had a room, I think 10 or 12 boys slept in this particular room. And there were many more. And it was a Catholic run. We had to go to church every day. And after all these years, we became fluent in Latin. We knew the Mass in Latin fluently. And before we had breakfast, lunch, or dinner, we had to say our prayers. And it was run just like a Catholic orphanage home.
What was the name of it?
Britannia. I will show you some pictures later.
How did you learn Latin?
From listening to church every day, and looking at prayer books. So you learned, even if you learned one word a day, after a couple of years, you know the whole prayer in Latin. And up to before the father passed away, he used to love to hear us say the Mass when we visited him in his home. He said, the only thing I taught you was to learn Latin, he said. Yeah.
During when you first arrived there, what contact did you have with your mother and sister?
None. But as I said, Professor Flum, he came once a week. It was Sunday. He told us our mother's all right, our sister is all right, and brought us a chocolate bar. And it was a visit of maybe 5 minutes. We walked with him in the garden, and he told us that our money was good, and we were happy to hear that. I think as a young person, I admit we were also happy to get the chocolate bar.
Who was this professor?
This was a man after the war. I learned that he was a great professor. Even they wrote about him in the Belgian newspapers, what kind of a great man he was, not only helping in the underground, but as a professor. He wrote many theses, and that they learned about from him.
What was daily life like in the orphanage?
It was morning church, 2 hours of school, the rest was play.
What did you learn totally in those years?
I believe in my own thinking, not too much. Because I always spoke Jewish to my brother when we were together. Because most of the time, sometimes he played ball with somebody else and so on. But when we got together for the few minutes, we spoke Jewish to each other. And it was great to know that he was there. And I'm sure he felt that it was great that I was there. And that was it.
How long were you there?
I was at the orphanage I think I was at the orphanage until 1944, when one day the priest called us to his office and he told us that he has problems, that the Germans are after him, and they know that there are Jewish, that he's hiding Jewish children, and that he hates to do it, but he would have to separate us. And we were stunned, my brother and I were very stunned. And he said, I do this only because I want to save your lives. And he said to me that I look more Jewish, that I would have to leave. For the first month, I believe I lived in a castle. I don't know the name of the baron, but it is a real castle with a moat in the front with water around, a real castle. I have pictures of this. I lived there for, I believe, 2 months. Time was we never looked at time. It wasn't something that, was necessary. And after a while, I must tell you, you get used to it. You get used to not seeing your mother. You get used to not seeing your sister. And life continues. And as young children, we forget. What you don't see, you forget. And I can't be sure, but I remember that I'm sure that there were weeks and months that I didn't even think of my mother and my sister. Because things happen, things go, life goes on, you go to church, you go to school, you play soccer, you meet other people, you become friends with other people, and you forget. And I'm sure that I didn't think about my mother or my sister for months upon time.
Who was this baron?
A friend of Pastor de Beukelaar. And I don't know what the negotiations were between them or who they were talking to, but I know I went there and I lived in this place which must have had, I'm just saying this, 500 rooms, and I was there all alone with the baron and his wife, but I never saw them. And there were some servants, but I never saw the baron, I never saw there were so many rooms. I know I couldn't go out. I could walk certain areas inside the house, but I couldn't go any place I wanted to. And I lived there like this for maybe 2 months. And then the father came, and I didn't see Father de Beukelaar either, because he didn't want to. And Father the Burglar came and he said that I have a problem, that you can't stay here anymore, and that I have to go to Antwerp, and he mentioned the place, and it was on the river, and that I have to go to this boat, and I went on a boat, on a coal boat.
How did you get to Antwerp?
I walked all night, all by myself. So when I said to you that we came very hard, sometimes, like I said, our children resented it because we were cold and hard, or when a child got hurt, we didn't have that sympathy. We were cold. It's nothing. You'll get over it. That kind of thing, you know. And I walked all night. And they gave me instructions. He gave me where to go, to speak to first when I got on it. And I spoke to the gentleman. I don't like to tell you what they did. It's on television, and I don't like to say that. The first thing he did is, I should tell you that. What they did is, they had a communal bed, like we had in the army. And not to be suspicious, they bandaged me when we took a shower. Not to be suspicious of being Jewish, because as you know, we're all circumcised. And this is what they did with me. And I went from city to city, all the way up to Rotterdam in Holland, and back. And I also remember I went to Lübeck in Germany with the boat. And also, life was hard, but we got used to it. And I guess as a young person, you could take more. As a middle-aged person, you shook it off, like we say, and you went on. And I was liberated in Geel, Belgium.
Before we get to that, how old were you when you left the Baron's castle to walk to Antwerp?
15. It was quite a walk. It's at least, the Baron's castle was in Schravenwezel. That's the town. Must have been at least 35 miles, 30. I think between 30 and 35 miles.
When you were bandaged on the boat, how long did you stay that way?
Every time we took a shower, we only took once a week a shower.
How did you feel about that?
Not happy, but it had to be done. The captain said, if you want to survive, that's what you have to do. And later on, we found out that the captain was paid for this. He was paid for this.
What was bandaging protecting you against?
That all the Gentile people who work on the boat with me will not see that I am Jewish.
What did they think if you were bandaged that was wrong?
I had a card. He was telling me to tell them I was sick, I had a little infection, I had a cut, that's all, these kind of things. And never to make a big deal out of it. Just, when I bandage you, just go into the shower and do it like nothing happened. And it did, nothing happened. They asked me, oh, I have a little infection.
How many people were on the boat?
14.
And how many Jews?
1.
What was the name of the boat?
Oh, God. Something with Huden. I don't know the second name. But Huden it means good. Goedendienst. Goedendienst. That means good work. Yeah, Goedendienst.
What did it feel like to be on the boat?
In the beginning it was very hard because I had to carry coals on my back. There was 50 kilos, it wasn't 50 pounds, 50 kilo sacks of coal where you had to carry it up and down whatever they wanted to. There was a leader and there was the workers and we had to do it. It was very hard. That's why I walk on one side. I don't know if you noticed it, but I walk on one side. My shoulder is not even.
How long did you do that for?
Until I was liberated. 3 or 4 months.
Thank you. We'll pick up on the next tape. Tape 4. The survivor is Siegfried Hudes. The date is October 31st, 1997. Where were you exactly when the war ended?
I was stopped in Geel, Belgium. The war, I found out that the Canadian troops liberated me. And I walked with the Canadian troops all the way from Geel, Belgium, into Antwerp.
How far is that?
At least 150 kilometers. That would be about 75 miles. We walked for a month because we couldn't walk straight through. There were fights and snipers. So that's why it took us a month from Geel to reach Antwerp, Belgium.
Who were the snipers?
The Germans, pockets of Germans who were all over, and they still were fighting, resisting the advances of the Canadians. And that's why, again, it took us a long time to reach Antwerp.
How did you feel about this walking back?
Wonderful, wonderful. We were liberated. I was looking to see my mother. I hope that my mother still is in Belgium, in Antwerp. I hope to see my sister, and I hope to find my brother, and that we become become one family unit again.
Who fed you on this walk back to Antwerp?
With the Canadian Army, I ate with them, slept with them. If I might tell you that they were the filthiest people that I ever saw. They were in war, and they fought for many, many weeks without even washing themselves. And they were very, very brave soldiers, as I know today, as a grown person. I walked with them. I even had 2 hand grenades in my shoes, and I laid with them whenever they were whenever they were down, they were pinned down by bullets. I laid with them on the floor until we reached Antwerp.
What do you think made them take you on?
Because I told them that I was alone. I just was liberated by you. I am Jewish. But also, I would like you to remember that all these years that I was a Christian, I still was a Jewish. I still loved my faith.
Were you aware during that period of the holidays, the Jewish holidays?
No. Because after years of going to church every day, that means 365 days a year. You forget, you mingle with other people and with other religions, and as a young person, you tend to forget.
You had mentioned previously that you wore forelocks, that you wore payas.
Yeah.
When were they removed?
They removed when the wartime came. We removed them, not to be suspicious. Our father told us to remove them.
When you finally arrived in Antwerp, what did you do?
I looked where I lived. I went to the house where I lived. I thought my mother and sister would be there, but unfortunately they were not. And then a neighbor told me that they took my mother, the Germans took my mother and my sister. And they couldn't remember what day it was.
And then what did you do?
I walked the streets, roamed the streets, slept in wherever I felt like sleeping. Until one day, I met a friend of my sister's who was in a Nazi uniform. And he told me that he was a spy for the Belgian underground in a Nazi uniform. And I have told him that my brother is in Shoah. And he said to me that I'm gonna get him. And he went with some friends. That's what I understood. I wasn't there. What I understood, he went with a truck and 4 friends, and they were killed by German snipers across the river. And that's the last I ever saw him again. Never saw him again.
Why would he be wearing a German uniform after the war?
He was working with the underground, for the underground, but wore an SS uniform. Black boots, black shirt, all what the SS wore.
Didn't you think that it was strange that he would be wearing that uniform
Yes,
afterwards?
but I knew him because he was a very dear friend of my sister's, and he used to come to the house many, many times. So I wasn't afraid of him after the war. I was liberated already. So the Canadian army was in Antwerp, so nothing could happen to me.
When did you finally get reconnected to your brother?
I was reconnected one day. I was looking into a food store because I was starving to death. And I was walking, I even know the street, Plantus Moretus Lie. And I was walking, and opposite my brother came. That's when I met him.
How long after your arrival in Antwerp did you see him?
After my arrival, at least 4 to 5 weeks, because I was by myself. And also, I was only maybe 16, 1945. I was born in 29, 16 years. I was 16 years old. And I had to live all by myself. No one, no mother, no father, no family, nothing, no friend. And walk the streets. But somehow, I guess I have this instinct from my parents to somehow survive.
What happened next?
Next, we were looking to find some place where we could stay, or sleep at least. And we found an elderly gentleman. He must have been 90 at the time. And he had a little room in an attic. The attic was just like it is in my house, like with the ceiling. And he had a bed there. And during the night we slept on the floor. And when he got up to say his prayers, went to shul, we went into bed to sleep for that hour.
Why did you do that?
Because we had no place to sleep, no place to go. We had a place to go, but we wanted to be already more independent. We didn't want to go to Schoten to the Pastor de Beukeler, and we wanted to live a little bit by ourselves now. And when we were liberated, we became Jewish again. We wanted to leave the thought of being a Christian for 3 years. Now we wanted to be back to being Jewish.
When were you reunited with your mother?
This was, I think, close to a year later. My brother and I used to have signs that when a transport came in from Germany, and then we looked what time it used to come in. Most of the time it came in the middle of the night. And whenever there was a transport, the few survivors, we all would meet at that time at the train station and see who came off. Naturally, we were looking for our family, for our parents. Never came. We got notice that my mother arrived from Pastor de Beukeler. He came to us on a Saturday afternoon where we had our little shul, and we sat in the courtyards with a few other young men. And he came to us and he took us in a corner and he said, "I got very good news for you, but don't get excited." And he told me, "May I just go back? My brother was not here. My brother went to look for family in Paris." So I was the only one in Antwerp. And he told me that your mother just arrived, but she's very sick and she's in the hospital. And I want you to do me one favor. When you see her, she looks terrible, but please don't cry, be strong. And we went to the hospital. And if I remember correctly, the first word she said to me, "Where is my brother?" And she started to cry. And I told him that he is in Paris looking for my uncle. And she didn't believe me. And she cried hysterically, I remember, until the doctor came and they gave her something to calm her down. And I left. It took about, my mother was a tall European woman, tall, heavy-set woman. She came back from hospital. She weighed maybe 68 pounds. Her eyes, I'll never forget them. They looked like they were a half a mile into her head. She just had finished typhus. And it took a while until she got to herself. And then she came back. Then we had to look for an apartment, where to live, an apartment. Let me say, we moved into an apartment which was bombed, half bombed and half standing, and we moved into this place. And if I remember right, we were thrilled to have her. Unfortunately, she told us that my sister didn't want to live after they shaved her hair and they gave her different clothes, and unfortunately she died a month later.
So how did your life continue after this?
My poor mother, she went to work on weddings. I don't know what she did, but whatever, she worked on weddings to help, and came home 2, 3 in the morning when there was a wedding party, and she brought us some leftovers, woke us up to give us what we call lechem, which means cake, so that we could enjoy also some food. And she worked and she hustled. You know, my mother is a Polish lady. She hustled, she worked there, she sold stuff, she bought, she got connections where, I don't know, but she sold and made a living that way. Bought stuff, sold stuff. Could be, I believe it was makeup or something like this, or if I remember right, it was stockings. But those days to find stockings, I don't know if you know about that, was very hard. And the well-to-do people, if you got them a pair of stockings, she made a living that way. I recollect now, yeah, stockings, yeah.
And what did you do?
We went and learned the profession. She made us go to work, and we started. I was a diamond cutter. I learned to be a diamond cutter. And I finished my diamond cutting. And I earned some money for cutting diamonds. But then we were ready to go to the United States. And my aunt wrote a letter that diamonds in the United States is not a good profession. We should learn something else. So we went to work in a fur place. And this is how we became furious in the States.
How did you connect with a family in the United States?
In Antwerp, we knew these two people, these two wonderful ladies who were in the underground. And they had a friend in the United States Army who was a chaplain. And those people introduced him to us. And he took us under his wing. With him, we had to go to shul on Saturday, because he was a rabbi. He gave services on Shabbos. But also, he helped us a tremendous amount. He gave us cigarettes to sell, gave us some clothes, some shoes to sell, things like this nature. And one day he decided to write a letter to the New York Forwards, the Jewish paper. And he gave an ad in the paper that two Jewish boys, twins, looking for their aunt. And he gave our name because we didn't know her name. And my uncle, who read the Jewish press, found the article and contacted him. And this is how my aunt and uncle made the papers for us to come to the United States.
How were they related to you?
My uncle's wife was my father's sister, whom I take care of now. She's 98 years old, lives in her own apartment with a full-time sleep-in service. Has no children, by the way, and her husband passed away. She's all alone by herself. We have 3 nephews, my brother, another nephew from her husband's side, and myself. We take care of her. And we visit her. I visit her twice a week. And my other cousin visits her twice a week to see if everything is in order for her. And my brother is not so much because he lives so far away. So, and she's a little senile, so it's hard to come a 5-hour trip that she sometimes don't know who he is.
So when did you leave Antwerp?
We left Antwerp February, if I'm right. I believe February 1947.
How did you arrive? How did you?
I think it was September. I am not sure. I think it was September 1947. Yes.
How did you come to America?
We came by boat. Our boat went to Hamburg first and then to the United States. It took us 2 weeks to reach the shores of New York City.
Who was with you?
My brother and I think 12 other people who came to the United States.
Where was your mother?
My mother was left in Antwerp. She couldn't come to the United States because she was a Polish citizen. And for us, we had an affidavit for $1 million and that we would not be a burden of the government of the United States. And since we were German Germans, we had the quota to come much faster than my mother. It took 5 years my mother came.
What was that like when you arrived in New York?
I couldn't believe that there are such big buildings in New York. we arrived on 24th Street in New York City, and we saw, first of all, we stood overnight because we couldn't get in. The tow trucks weren't allowed to take us in at nighttime. So we saw all the lights from all the big buildings. And also we saw the Statue of Liberty, which all of us on the boat gazed for hours. And this is the famous statue. And the next morning, we got off the boat and my aunt and uncle were there. And they took us home, which I didn't know then, but now is Yonkers, New York, which was, to me, a magnificent place. I've never lived in a place like this, with a terrace overlooking the park, and we had our own room. It was beautiful.
What happened after that?
After this, we went to look for a job in New York. Those days, we lived in McLean Avenue. We had to take a trolley car, then take the subway on 242nd Street. It took us at least an hour and a half to go to the city, where the 3rd District was. And it took months and months and months to find someone to give us a job. But we found it. We worked hard. I remember we made $11 a week. And after a while, I had a little argument with my uncle because he wanted me to work in the bakery at night. He wanted me to work during the day in New York and at night work in the bakery. And I said, I can't do it. I need sleep. I can't do it. So my brother and I moved out. And we rented a room for $5 a week. And since my brother made $11 and I made $11, we worked in separate places. We had enough to get by.
Where was that room?
96th Street. And not Columbus, what is the other street? I forgot. No, towards the water. It's by the water. No, Amsterdam is on the other side, it's going towards the park. West End Avenue. 96th Street. It's still there. It's called Hotel Paris.
What was the name of the place you had your first job?
My first job was Nathan Ned, 282 7th Avenue. And Nathan Ned became like my father. He loved me like his son. He had 3 daughters, and I was his son. And he helped me tremendously. I worked for him until I went to United States Army. I worked for him from beginning of 1948 till I went to the Army in 1952. And when I came back, he put us into business.
Why did he do that?
I guess he felt sorry. I'm just guessing. He felt sorry that what we suffered, what we went through in wartime. And he was a very, very nice person. He was a good person. And he never told me that, but he felt a little sorry for us. So he tried to help us as best as he could. He was my friend. I loved him more than anybody in the world until he passed away. visit us. He came to visit us every week in our store that we opened up in Richmond Hill, Queens. He visited us, and that kind of person he was.
What type of a store was it?
We had a fur store. Yes. A beautiful fur store. To us, it was very scary in the beginning to be a business person. It wasn't easy to try and sell a lady a fur coat, and we young people, and we didn't speak the language as good as you speak it now, and it was very difficult, but we managed with his help. You must remember that we didn't have any money to invest in the business, so he helped us out with merchandise. We always had a full store of coats and garments and jackets. So if we sold it, we paid him, which was a great, great help to us.
What did you do in the Army?
I tried to become an interpreter. I was inducted in Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and I tried to become an interpreter. But to become an interpreter, I had to have college, and I did not have that. So what I became is a table tennis player. And I played all over the United States, for the United States Army, for the 7th Army. They took me by plane or by helicopter to play all over, in any camp in the United States. Camp Breckenridge, went to Houston, Texas, all over. I played Sam Houston. And I played with all the officers.
Thank you. We'll continue on the next tape.